Discover PowerShell. Today I'd like to talk about splatting, which is a feature in PowerShell that allows you to map a hash table or an array to a command, and it unravels the data in that object and maps it to parameters in the command. The two documents, the help documents that I'd like you to refer to, are about splatting and about parameters default values. There are two automatic variables that we'll work with, the PSBoundParameters and the PSDefaultParameter values. And you can also use, as I said, arrays. I don't really like it. When you use a hash table, you're using a key value pair, so you are specifying explicitly the parameter name. Arrays allow you to use um, the parameters that are positional, and I don't really like working with that, so we won't talk about that today. But if you refer to about splatting, it will give you an example of that. So first we're going to start off with the setup. So we're going to create a hash table. You can name it whatever you want, and then we're going to give it just some names, key value pair names. So I want to do, let's say, name. I'm going to look for PowerShell ISE, and I would like to use the switch for bows. And when you use a switch, it has to be a boolean, so you would put a true or false. So I could have done this, and that would be similar to doing, let's see, like this. So if you've worked with the true false with the switch, then that's basically what we're doing here. Okay, and one last one. Okay, so now we have our hash table set up, and I'm just making up some stuff right here. And I want to go ahead and create a custom function. Now this isn't required. I just want to do this for the demo to show the different ways that the variables are being used or passed around. So I'm going to call a test parameter function, and um, and I'll just start off with outputting the arguments. So args is an automatic variable, and let me run it. Oh, space. Okay, so no arguments that were passed there. So if I provide the parameters hash table, then you can see the arguments that have been passed to it. So pretty straightforward. So anything that's in the hash table, when you use the symbol, the li symbol, and then the variable name, then it will map it to whatever is there. In this case, I don't have anything, so there is no mapping. It's just args is just telling me what arguments were passed to it. So I could have provided, let's see if this works. So in this particular function, there is no type of error checking on it. So anything that I pass to it just works, and as you can see, it shows it on the screen. So the next thing we want to do is create a param, so I can have, well-known arguments. So I'll do message, and so we know that args will output everything that's passed to it. So now I want to do the automatic variable PSBound parameters. Okay, so as you can see now, message is no longer message is no longer in the args variable. It's displayed in the PSBoundParameters hash table. And so that means that when the command was executed and the arguments were unraveled, that specific value, something interesting, was mapped to the parameter message, and then it was removed from the args. Now I could do name. Yeah, so if I put name, then you should see it also in the list. But I can go ahead and remove that and see it works just fine. If I want to display the value of name, I can do that, and see it doesn't output anything because that doesn't exist. So it's an argument, and it's not a this dollar name doesn't exist anywhere inside this function. So if I wanted to get um, the name, I would have to index into the args array. And let's see, that was for verbose. So I want to do the second one, and then now I can get the, oh, that's not the right one. Let me try 2. Name and 3. There we go. So as you can see, this is an array. So if I want to get PowerShell ISE from that array, then I have to go to 0, 1, 2, 3. And as you can see, I have a 3. So it's not something I work with all the time because it just really isn't intuitive. And if you were writing a function and you were going to pass on to other developers or other users of your function, if they try to read it, they're not going to know what args contains. And as you can see, if I flip any of this around, if I change the order of it, um, you're going to get unexpected results. If I remove stuff, like if I removed verbose, well then now this no longer works. It's going to be in a different position. So I just try and avoid using the args. But it works, it's there, and there may be a time where you find it useful. So the next one that we want to try is the PS default parameter values hash table. So let me type that in the console real quick. So you can see it recognized that that's an automatic variable, and when I was testing earlier, I'd actually added it, and so if I wanted to remove it, because it's a hash table, I could do clear. Oop. And if I try it again, there's nothing in there. So by default, it's just going to be an empty hash table. So I want to create it. So the variable's there, and now I'm going to define what's in the hash table. So I want to put, let's see, I want to have a date output. So the way you start it off with is the command name that you're going to work with, and then a colon and the parameter that it will be mapped to, and then you can I'll go ahead and just put a static date. If I run it, okay, I didn't output it anywhere, so let me add it. Okay, so there was just no space in it, but if I were to remove everything else that was output, you'll see. Okay, so this hash table shows that I have my key, which is the command name and the parameter, and then the value. Now let's see, I want to get the date. Well, date doesn't exist, right? So if I add it, it still doesn't exist. And let me remove this so it's a little less confusing. So in order to get the PS default parameters to work, you need to have the parameter attribute. And okay, well the tab completion didn't work too well on that. But when I add it, now I've created a problem because my hash table contains a name key, and because I've added this attribute parameter, now it's doing more matching and saying, hey, this parameter name doesn't exist. So go ahead and add that, and it still doesn't work. And let's see why. Parameter name something. Oh, and see here, I just typed in something random. So now that I've added this parameter attribute, there's a lot more error checking, and that's great. Keeps you from doing things that you didn't know you should be not doing, but whatever. So now we get the date, and that works fine and dandy. You can use on the default parameters, you can use the wildcard. Still works. So this is great. I've used this at work in scenarios where we want to do send mail message. And if you look at the help on send mail message, it takes in things like the SMTP server um, and if you have that as if you want to create some standard value that's always used and you don't want to have to maybe use the wrong server, then I would recommend putting that in like your profile or putting at the top of the script to have that. And then the great thing is that when you are using the hash table, you're splatting, well then when you have other commands, or if you're wanting to run the same command more than once, then you don't have to type all the parameters out. And sometimes, like for send mail message, there are a lot of parameters that you have to put in every single time you want to run the command. So using splatting saves, typing saves time. It saves, space on the screen. So if you're trying to scan through the code to see what's going on, then you don't have to clutter it up with all the extra, redundant code. Um, yeah. So this is the automatic variable. By default, it's empty. And then the PSBoundParameters is what gets mapped in the command. So in order to use the PSBoundParameters, make sure that you have those parameters defined in your function. And I think that's it for now. Once again, refer to the About Splatting help, and I'll show you that real quick. And as you can see, it shows a couple examples. In this particular example, they have two functions, and they are removing parameter and then calling another function. So you can play around with it if you use proxy functions. So if you've worked with that, or if you want to look it up and figure out how to use it, proxy functions work with the PSBoundParameters object, and it allows you to essentially enhance the parameters on your function, and then um, once you've received the bound parameters, then you can add and remove parameters and then call the base function. So like you could do a proxy function on getAdUser and have a switch that says look for all enabled users, and then using that switch, then you can configure how your filter works on the getAdUser. But once again, recommend looking into the help documents, and if you got any questions, feel free to post a comment, and hope you have a great day.